Thanks, Joe. Hi, Frank.
Hi.
Frank, any fresh injury concerns? Any players returning for the game at Old Trafford?
No, we don't have players returning. Mason, Reece and Chile won't make the game. Ben Molyneux's out, I think, so we're as we were. I think Jow had a small injury at the weekend, so he's back involved.
You mentioned Mason Mount there. Does that feel like a lost cause from a Chelsea perspective? Does it feel like he has played his last game at Chelsea?
A lost cause? I don't know. It's not my answer to make. It's probably between Mason and the club.
How much are you relishing the test posed by a Manchester United team still needing a point to qualify for the Champions League next season?
Yeah, I mean it's a similar situation to approaching Manchester City, albeit they won the league the night before, but they're a high-level team who, in a really positive way, Manchester United will have that. So it's the same point from how I approached going into City and how the players approach it, more importantly, in terms of if people think we haven't got much on the game, then the players have to show them that there is, in terms of their personal and collective approach to it in the game, because we'll obviously have to go there with a very good mentality, because they're a good team that are fighting for something that we've fought for many years, and now we're not in that position. So players need to show.
I was going to ask you about Raheem Sterling as well. There's some suggestion he might be left out of the England squad for the games next month. Do you see that as a setback based on maybe the season he's had, or do you look at it the other way, that it's a chance to just then switch off after this Newcastle game and go again in sort of September for those internationals?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know the exact details of the conversation between Raheem and Gareth, and where that's at all. So all I do know is that Raheem is obviously a top level player who's played for England for a lot of time. So just from my sort of personal memories of playing in England for many years, I know that sometimes these games at the end of the season are different challenges compared to individuals that have played a lot of games, a lot of minutes, and so if there's a mutual conversation between the two of them, then I'm sure they'll find the right outcome, best for England, best for Raheem.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Cheers. We'll go to Ian, talkSPORT.
Hi Frank. As this is your last press conference here, and you've only got a couple more games to go, can you put your finger on why this season has been so disappointing?
I think there's probably a lot to go over to get to the bottom of it, because for a club like us that generally has been challenging the top end of the league and for cups year after year for many years. I mean, there's probably been a couple of years where we've come off it at different times, but when you are used to that, then I think you have to explore every reason and make sure you don't let those reasons happen again. And some of that in terms of football and squad is a personal and collective responsibility in terms of what happens on the pitch, but we have to look at every issue the club does to try and be sure that doesn't happen going forward.
I think the feeling outside this building, this club, is that next season, when you look at who might challenge, the phrase that's always been used is that Liverpool and Chelsea will wake up and they'll be much better and they'll be challenging. Is that how you see it as a football man, that next season it won't be that difficult to switch it round, so that once again this club is up challenging top four and maybe cups and things?
Well, I don't know that, because the Premier League moves on very fast. Everyone's moving on and trying to do the same things, and you see the emergence of the Newcastles and Brightons and Aston Villas and these teams that are getting themselves in that equation now for top four, at least this season. And my experience of football is that if you switch it off, it's not easy to switch it on. So that doesn't always become an overnight remedy. So that's obviously not going to be my responsibility, but as I say, from my experience of being in a consistent performing club and squad for many years, the moment you do switch it off, become very hard to switch it on. So I think it's that will be the test next year.
Players don't always know when it's their time to go and have that great goodbye, and it was a bit like that with you in Chelsea. I remember when you came back with Derby in that League Cup tie, you went round and thanked everybody because you never really got that chance to say goodbye. Looking ahead to tomorrow and Sunday, obviously you're not going to be in next season, but have the players had the conversation so that they maybe get that chance, like for example Mason Mount, if we are all right in saying he might leave in the summer, have the players had that opportunity to be told that and maybe have their goodbyes at the weekend?
Well, not that I'm aware of, and I think I would be aware of that. So that would be a conversation with club and player. I had the conversation when I was here, but it was after the last game of the season at home, so it was a different situation. But as far as we stand here now, players are contracted to the club, and who knows what the future lies individually, collectively for everyone. But at this moment, I'm not aware of that.
Finally, on for you, I mean, it'd be great to see you back in management next season somewhere, wherever that may be. But you look at the Premier League this year, 11 out of the 20 clubs have changed managers. Is this the most uncertain now that football management has ever been, in terms of if you don't get things right within months, you can expect to be out of a job?
Yes.
Is that,
No, I think the stat that you rolled off says it, doesn't it? I think, is that a record? I presume it's a record. So I think, you know, there are understandable factors to it in terms of the brand of the Premier League and what it means to teams to stay in there. So I think it's viewed that differently now if the first person receives the blame, if you want to put it that way, is the coach. And if you understand that when you go into these jobs, then that's probably a good thing to understand it. But of course, there's lots of other factors in these things. I'm not talking about my own position here. I'm talking about all these managers, and you know, you wonder how successful always it is to change in those things. So, but yeah, it's clear that it's become that kind of a job and a situation. And there are many teams that are fighting possibly with expectations that might not be exactly stable. So that bit is hard, and we're in a very reactionary world anyway. So I think in years gone by, the reaction of 1, 2, 3 defeats or whatever it might be would have been different. Now we have this sort of explosion very quickly, and I think you just have to understand that when you're doing this job.
good luck for someone, good luck next season.
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, go to Bashali next.
Hi Frank,
Hi.
Obviously the club confirmed the news of Barry Shield's injury. What's the time frame on his recovery, and how big a blow is it for him personally?
It's a big blow for him. I'm really disappointed for him because he's come here. I think he's impressed, and you know, the games just before he got injured, I was very happy with him, and I think he's going to be a really good player for the club. But the injury is unfortunate. It's a bit of a complicated injury in his hamstring, and we're probably talking months rather than weeks, unfortunately. And that's all I'll say at the minute, because you know it's a little bit complicated, as I say. But I hope for him that the timing of it over the summer means he's not missing games, and you know he comes back stronger.
In terms of the goalkeeper selection process for these last 2 games, obviously we saw Edwin play against Forest, Cap at the weekend. From your point of view, are you looking at making rotations in that position for the last 2 games?
We'll see. We'll see. You know, I don't think any other manager, regardless of what's on the game, is probably going to declare their team to me. So we'll see.
And just one final one for me. In terms of the game against Manchester United, what do you want to see from your players out there?
Well, the usual requirements and the basics, which I've spoken about a lot since I've been here, and they're not easy to switch on. You have to train and prepare, and it has to be like a standard set. And unfortunately, we haven't met that standard this season regularly enough. And in my time here, the one thing I can say is that I've seen probably some reasons why. But in the short term, for 2 games that are left now in 3 days, the players have to reach the standard and level of performance I think that we did at Manchester City. To be fair, not an easy game for the players there to approach that game because of what was going on at their end. And I thought we approached it, we deserved more out of the game. And the performance, I can say, was, there's lots to improve, but the attitude and the application and all the basics were good and right. And that's what I expect to see in the last 2. Thank you.
Last one on the section from Liam.
Hi Frank, I wanted to ask about Paul and Stanley and Lawrence Stewart, because they were only appointed to co-sporting director roles a couple of months before you came in. So how's the dialogue been with them in this short period of time, and how have they been to work with?
Yeah, the dialogue's been really good. From the moment this opportunity came up for me, I've had really good dialogue. Been able to get on well with them on a personal and professional level, and it's nice to have that communication close. You know, something when you work in this job, you understand when you don't have that feeling of a close communication on the football inside, you miss it. And with both of them, with Paul and Lawrence, I've had that in their own ways, and that's been a good thing, and I appreciate that. And obviously, there's their big job. You know, we want to bring Chelsea back to where we want to get it to, but the responsibility is not all theirs, but they play an important role, of course, in it. And I've been impressed by how our interactions have been, and you know, I wish them well, certainly going forward off the back of this period for me, in how they work and operate going forward.
From what you've seen on the inside, do you think Chelsea now have the structure above the head coach to start building the club back up to the level that it was?
Yeah, well, I think so. And you know, when you look at the good models around that have consistency in those areas and decision making and how the club moves forward, I think they're generally the more successful clubs. We talk a lot about the Brightons and the Brentfords now, and now the Newcastle, Manchester City, all in different ways. But I think there's a real alignment of thinking through the club. And I think where we are at the minute, I think that will be the work process of trying to say where are we aligned and where do we want to get to and what does it look like. You know, there's a lot of work in that, and I think, as I say, in Paul and Lawrence, I think we have good people in there to do that. Because as I say, I think being connected is a big deal, and it's hard in the modern world because I think everything, as I mentioned earlier, is very reactionary. So if you want to go in a certain direction and you don't get any joy for a while, then of course people will react to that. But this, you know, could be for Chelsea a bit of a longer picture than that, to try and get a bit more of a process. So of course Chelsea have to get that right at their end, but obviously people have to stick with that along the way.